later on today. And then on the phone with me is my good friend and complete opposite mindset is Sonia Celedon. The reason we do it together is because she and I are on opposite extremes of life. So what we want to do is kind of start with generally what the American Bar Association says is the well-being of an attorney, right? And it's all of these components together. So this is the ABA, their toolkit on wellness. I will cut and paste this website and put it into the chat for anybody who wants to go in. It's a really interesting, cool toolkit. But the ABA has been putting a lot of emphasis on like our well-being. And it's all of these pieces, your physical health, the spiritual, the intellectual, the occupational, emotional, and social. And we're here to tell you that imposter syndrome hits all of these on any given day and every single day. So so this is the agenda for today. What is it? Who has it? Who wants it? And what's the purpose, right? My executive coach often says the things that we keep are the things that have a purpose in our lives. And so everyone has had it at some point or another. Justice Sotomayor, these are quotes from her speeches, right? She's always looking and wondering when she's going to measure up. And she's a Supreme Court justice. And she always walks in wondering, like, can she measure up to who's in the room? Which is crazy, but truthful. So what is it? Go ahead, Sonia.
Hi, guys. I'm super, super, super happy to be here. I love the fact that I get to do this with my dear friend, Grisel, who she will talk about her imposter syndrome, but she is a rock star in her own great, amazing career accomplishment. So I'm very, very grateful and super honored to be here. One of the things that we talk about is what is imposter syndrome, right? It is worried about that, like Sotomayor in her quotes that say, should you belong in the room? Are you prepared? Are you smart enough? Are you good enough? You worried about making a mistake, of saying the wrong thing, of giving the entry to be in the room or have the opportunity, but then the minute you make a mistake, are people going to gotcha? You really don't belong here, and you're going to be in figuratively escorted out, right? Are you do you have the right tools? Do you have the right competencies? Did you get it because of luck, right? Or it just happened to be given the opportunity or being in the position, out of pure chance? Is everyone going to find out you're not a good lawyer? And while we were prepping for this, I was having a conversation with Grisel because we have opposite, experience, and I don't think experience, the ways of looking at this imposter syndrome, which is why she said we always look at this. But I was telling her that one of the 2024 goals of mine is to be a writer, to write a book. And I was telling her, and I said, the first thing that came into my mind when we're talking about imposter syndrome is like, who do you think you are, Sonia, to become a writer, to write anything? What are you thinking? You're just a random lawyer. What are you doing trying to write a book at this stage in your life? And then I tell her, but you know what I think I say to myself? Have you seen the trash books that are out there? And the type of garbage that gets published. If that garbage gets published, then my stuff can get published. And then we'll talk about mindset, and we'll kind of circle back of why I say that to myself. And I'm like, there are a million mediocre men who have written books. So what am I doing? Why am I even worried about it? But it is a lot of our own internal voice giving us doubts and thinking about whether we really belong in the space or in the circumstances that we put ourselves with as we ascend as professionals.
And one of the things that we want to think about in this particular workshop is when we talk about mindset, what is the Latino mindset? What is the immigrant mindset? What is the mindset of individuals like me that are, born and raised in very poor parts of the country? Because the Latino mindset is always about like there's an underlying thought of religion, right? Like we always in Spanish say like, I'm going to do this. Heaven forbid, right? God permit. Con Dios y la Virgen, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, like God will allow it and the Virgin will make it happen, right? So we culturally, we hear all the time that is an external focus that provides us with luck or blessings, and that then kind of implies the opposite. If you don't have Dios y la Virgen, then you're bad and you don't deserve the praise or the success or the attributes that we have, right? So it's that kind of like dual thing where it's like, you're blessed, pero si Dios y la Virgen lo permite, right? If somebody else permits you to be blessed. And we talk about when you attribute or when you worry that you're not a good lawyer. For me, as a younger practitioner, so I've been practicing 17 years, I think from the time I first went into a law firm till about 9 years in law firm life, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have billable hours this week. I don't know if I'm ever going to meet my time. I always met my time. I always exceeded my time. But if a case ended, I was like, oh my God, someone's going to notice that I don't have enough hours. Someone's going to know. And it was always someone's going to something. And none of it was ever good. My filler was never, someone's going to think I'm amazing. It was always like someone's going to worry about or someone's going to say something about. So we want to talk about what happens in your physiological body. And this is where I'm going to need you all to throw stuff in the chat, and the chat is not recorded, so please do so. When you feel that you're not sure, when you feel like a foreigner in the room, where do you feel it? So for me, when my imposter syndrome is at its highest, I start clenching and I use my shoulders as my earrings. Where do you physically feel it? Sonia, while we're waiting for people to put stuff on the chat, where do you physically feel it?
In the pit of my stomach.
And I'm trying, does anybody see the chat? Because I can't see the chat.
In my panza. Yeah.
In my
Exactly.
panza.
In my
Whoever
panza, in the
wrote
pit of
that,
my
yes.
stomach. 1,000%. Yes.
Where else? Where else do you guys
Between
see
my
it?
shoulder blades, I see. Chest
Yeah.
and stomach. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the physiological component. Miguel, I see you, so I'm gonna call you out, dude. ¿Dónde tú lo ves? Oh, you're like me. Miguel, somebody and I, we like to wear shoulders as earrings. They make beautiful earrings, by the way, my shoulders. That's where I use it most. Where else do you feel it? I know that for I work with a colleague who feels it in her hands. She gets like sweaty palms. She's like, look at me. I'm like, I'm not trying to touch you, man. I'm not. But when you're feeling that intense fear, that's in the back of your brain. The base of your brain is where fight and flight exists. And imposter syndrome is the trigger, the physiological trigger of your wanting to survive in a room or in an environment, of your wanting to do well, which is why there's this intense feeling of fear or paralysis. And a lot of us have this kind of like double-edged sword. We want to be so perfect. We're so worried about getting it perfectly that we actually paralyze ourselves. That is something for students and practitioners that are in like year 1 through 5 is often exhibited, right? They so want to be perfect that they kind of forget to just do it. And it causes a lot of anxiety and insecurity in us. And frankly, as you all know, attorneys have the highest level of use of drugs and alcohol than any other discipline. And part of it is because we live our lives on other people's mistakes, right? I'm a litigator. All I do is litigate people's mistakes. Who did what to whom, when, and how does my client profit or die from it, right? corporate people who are drafting, what do you draft for? You draft so that the meeting of the minds is exactly the same, and you're always drafting on behalf of your client. And if you mess up the drafting, it's your client who's going to hurt, right? So we spend enormous amount of time focusing on errors and mistakes and how to avoid them, despite the fact that we're humans and forget that. So who has it? If you're on this call, if you're part of the 60 participants on this call, I'm going to guess that you have spent a moment in your career with imposter syndrome. And in fact, one of our colleagues was on shortly before you came on. He came on to say he is on the managing committee of his actual law firm, and he's had it for a couple of years. And in the course of his couple of years, someone has said the only reason he is on the managing committee is because he's Latino and diverse. I have had people, I had S&P Global, which if you've ever heard of the S&P 500, that's my company. I had the labor and employment department there. I have had people be like, yeah, that's because, you came in before this whole Supreme Court stuff. So it's always fun to be the recipient of people's misconceptions. But the worst part is that I receive it and sometimes I integrate it, right? Which is different from Sonia. So Sonia, tell us your experience of imposter syndrome.
It's a little different perspective because I use it as fuel, right? And I've had and I think I got the imposter syndrome early on, and before I even started my career, and the questioning whether I belonged or not happened in my teens, right? When I was in college, and rather than internalize it, from a personality perspective, I think I used it as fuel, and I'd be like, bueno, I either think or swim, and I'm gonna have to figure it out. And a lot of the times I use my own psyche into saying, bueno, todo mundo, well, I should say it in Spanish, and I'll say it in English. Todo mundo se pone los pantalones de la misma manera. Everybody puts on their pants the same way. And if I think it that, and I always use it from that perspective, that everyone's human, and everybody has similar baselines. La dos patas las ves. Thank you. Yes. But no, I think I see it as fuel to prove people wrong in their misconceptions, because misconceptions are there. I'm not naive to think that people, the minute I walk into the room and see me, they think that that I belong in the room. But I am less critical of it internally than I think a lot of us would be, because I suffered from it really early on, and I look at it very different. Like, I am here. If I can, if a mediocre white man is in the room, why can't I, and come in as prepared as I possibly be. But it is very different than how we tend to see it a lot more time. I internalize it a lot less, I think.
And for me, I still struggle with it, right? Part of the reason I think I'm fascinated by this topic is that I still struggle with it. Although it helps to feel me when someone says, oh, you're running S&P because the LNE in S&P because you're Latina. We are the onlys, right? There's been no Latina who's run Hershey's compliance department. There's been no Latina who's ever run S&P's LNE department. And it means that I have to face my ugly. It aligns with the sense of humility that we have, right? Latino culture is about being humble. It's about, again, this idea of the group mentality. But we get evaluated on our personal performance, right? Our discipline, lawyers don't usually work in major groups. we're pretty much individual silos. I started the job, and like the first call I had with the GC, I was panicked. And I know the guy from a different place, like, but it's just the constant battle between understanding that I belong and believing that I belong. I think that's where that's my struggle, right? I understand I belong. I understand I earned the promotion, but I don't always sit with it well. And Schultz said it best, right? Very few people, whether you've been in that job before or not, in this get into the seat and believe today that they're qualified to be CAO, and the truth of the matter is it's not, right? I believe I'm qualified, but who knows? Who knows and what happens? Who knows and when? Sonia, what would you say is the most recent time that I know that you talked about the writing, but what's the most recent time besides the writing that you've thought, I am not part of the clique? Because ultimately, right, that's what imposter syndrome is, like, you're not the clique.
Yeah, I think it happens in every stage as you ascend, from in your career. I think when I recently got appointed into the risk officer, when I had compliance and then privacy and the CPO role, and then I got the extra on to head risk, I knew very little of risk, and had to report now directly findings with the board and all those things. And here's me, checking along, like, and of course I said, when it was offered to me, I said absolutely. And then in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't know how to do this. Oh my. And you got like 60-year-old, white men on the board with a sprinkle of brown faces, but the majority are going to be white male faces staring at me as I present this, and they're going to think I talk like a 15-year-old, and I don't look old enough for this job, and I don't wear the gray and black suit, and I want to walk in and they're going to be like, what is this caricature walking into the door going to be doing it? And again, because I internally self-talk to myself a lot, I'm like, bueno, I'm going to have to figure this out. And el que no la sabe si las inventas, right? The one who doesn't know, like, will figure it out. And that's usually how I play my life. Bueno, the one who doesn't know se las inventa. And I think that has helped me a lot, because, self affirmation is transformational when it comes to your psychic and how you view life, right? And how you view struggles, and how you view successes, and how you view having struggles. So I do a lot of this even before it became a thing. So I was a little girl, I'd be like, well, everything's gonna work out, Ben, Sonia, things are gonna work out, and so it's gonna be great, and you're gonna do this, and it's gonna happen. And that's kind of like the internal conversation. And I was, oddly enough, I'm sitting outside the board where the board was meeting. This was in December 8th, actually, this last December. And I was having conversations with myself. You can do this, Sonia. It's okay. I'm like, and I will refuse to wear a gray and black suit, and I refuse to wear the standard things that I should be wearing just because I look the way I look, right? So I come in, as Grisel would know, with a hot pink suit or a hot pink dress, and I walk in and I do my spiel, and I walk out, I'm like, well, bueno, if this didn't land, then I'll get fired. And what's the worst that can happen? And then I move on. And it's 9 times out of 10, it's perfectly fine. And we're minority professionals that have made it into our space, so we know we're over prepared, overtrained, and very critical in our type of work. And 9 times out of 10, everything's fine. But it happens. It happens to me. It's just my mindset about it is a little different.
So speaking of my mindset and imposter syndrome, I had to mute myself because my 14-year-old is screaming in the background. So it's always fun when you're the one that's presenting, you have no idea. I will share with you, I'm going to share my screen again. What I want to share is all of the tips that we've put together that you can help in terms of looking at your imposter syndrome. Again, the first thing we did was ask you, where did you feel it? How do you know you're feeling it? Here's a tip. Start with rewiring your brain. I'm a psychologist by trade. Before I went to law school, I have a degree in psychology. I will tell you that this was the best thing ever. I don't know if you could see my sticky notes on screen. I have like these little like sign here notes for those of you who are just listening. There's like these sign here notes, these little flags. So my executive coach, Jill Cruz, who happens to do a lot of work with HMBA, she said every time you say something negative about yourself on any given day, take a little flag and post it on your screen, right? Just on your screen. Every time you like criticize yourself, because I will say this, nobody can bully me the way I bully myself. I am an expert at beating myself up. Nobody's business. I can beat myself up. So what she said was every time you say something negative to yourself, put a little flag on your screen, right? So I would put a little flag on my screen, say over here. The first time I did, and she's like, that way you can become aware of every time that you are criticizing yourself. The most powerful voice in the world is your own voice, psychologically speaking. So at the end of the day, I was supposed to take each flag and say something positive I did during the day to myself. So for example, while I was preparing this workshop, right? Literally, while I'm working on the slides, I'm like, I don't know if this looks good. I don't know if this even hits. I don't know if this is the right thing. Every time I don't know myself, because I love to beat myself, I would take a flag, right? And at the end, I had to go through the deck and see, okay, what about this particular slide is good? What about this particular deck is good? Because I have to constantly rewire my brain. I am open about the fact that I came from a family that was a mix of a very abusive person and a very loving mother. And so I internalized a lot of the messages from home, right? I internalized a lot of the negative talk from home. So for me, I had to do this flag thing. Every once in a while, I still go back to the flag stuff. When I've been wearing my shoulders as earrings because I've been clenching because I'm so like anxious, I go back and start this exercise again. So it's about rewiring your brain. You have to become self-aware to be able to rewire it. Then look at evidence objectively, right? To Sonia's point, what's the worst thing that can happen? They can fire me. Frankly, I'm the major breadwinner in my house. If they fire me, I'm gonna die. La nena's gonna like end up homeless. Everything's gonna like I go from 0 to 1,000 in catastrophe. So when I'm looking at things objectively, sometimes that means, and you've heard me say this, those of you who've been on, get your board of directors, get your personal board of directors. Those are the people that do what we do, that are attorneys, that can help you, that can be your cheerleaders and say, you know what, Grisel, you're not going to be homeless if you drafted a word instead of a different word, right? If you put, I'm an employment attorney, so putting, termination versus date of notice is a big deal for us when we're drafting. If I did that mistake, it's okay. Life happens. Open the time machine. All of you on this call have successfully gone through law school, or most of you. Some of you are in law school now. Some of you have gone through high school, whatever. Open the time machine and face the fact that you have been successful. So what I want you to do is in the chat, tell me, what were you successful at today? Go ahead. Tell me something that you were successful at today. And I'm gonna ask Sonia if you could read them out as they come along. What have you been successful at today? And it's okay. Don't worry about being humble. No one's gonna like say you're Horrible.
Took time for
Amazing.
myself to hit the gym. I guess I finished my first day of externship,
Nice.
delegating and teaching others the substantive areas of law. That's huge. See?
That's mentoring. What
I was
else?
successful in creating Canva presentations for students for work. I figured out a great response in a brief. Updating,
Nice.
that's great. Updating clients on matters.
That's hard because clients, I'm a client. Yo soy una jodienda con 20 pendejas.
Led a meeting in my boss's absence. That's huge. Got called in class, prepared for a termination hearing I have tomorrow.
Oh, that's hard.
A lot of
For
stuff.
those,
I had success budget reviews meetings, my co-chairs.
yeah. And you get on this call and you're participating, right? Figure out your ant. The hardest part for all of us when we're facing our imposter syndrome is figure out the ant. It is, we love to say, but I got this promotion, but. And I will say, my mother used to say, watch your butt. You got to move your butt or watch your butt. Watch your butts, right? We all got to watch our butts. Start with and. Try to switch out the but for and. I got this promotion and I'm going to learn the rest of the things I need to learn for this job, right? So start thinking about your and. Know your feelings may not be saying the truth. On this call is a friend of mine who, when I was interviewing for this job, I was in a full-on panic. Sonia was there. My other friend was there. We were like in a group chat. And I was saying like, I just don't know if I should even go for it because I was having a hard time at my old job. And I was feeling quite lost, right? Feeling quite lost doesn't mean I actually am lost. But to get there, to understand that I was just feeling it, that it was an emotional, physiological reaction, I needed my board of directors. Because I had tried the wiring my brain, right? I was like, oh, I deserve this getting this job. None of that worked. But I needed to understand that the feeling was a feeling in the moment. Don't make mistakes and think that you're a fraud, right? The easiest thing that we do as a community is like feel that we're a fraud. And we like to go 0 to 60. When you're someone who suffers from imposter syndrome, oftentimes you go from 0 to 60, right? You catastrophize. As I said, I do this all the time. I go from, oh my God, to, the world has ended and now I'm homeless. It's a mistake and I haven't been homeless yet. Learning your and is you can study and you can learn, right? I can study, I can learn this stuff. Sonia, you take these.
And I'm on mute. The study and you can learn is like, bueno, we'll figure it out, right? And that's a big one because you all have done it in all of your stages of your career. You don't think you have, but you all have figured it out. You got to think about the big picture. Like, how is this impacting this particular thing is going to impact my career as a whole, or your particular circumstance in your job or in your class or in your project, because they're really hypersensitive in that particular task. But when you take a breath and step back and be like, is it really as deep and as critical where I'm, kicking it like, 8,000 roads ahead, somehow this is going to be the end of the world. It's not the end of the world most of the time, unless you're applying for like this huge job or you're like, in front of the Supreme Court. There are very small instances what it is, but most of the time, think big picture, think how this all fits in the journey of your job, in the journey of your life, in the journey of your project. And more times than not, it's not as hyper important as what your brain claims it to be. and then you will be fine. And then once you take that energy out, you typically perform much better and at a much higher level, because you don't have that blockage in your brain, because you're like, I think Lisa, because you're paralyzed from it. If you think about big picture and how it is that it's how important it really is, then when you take that inhibitor out, you're going to perform so much better. Paralysis by analysis is 100%. Grisel already mentioned the board of directors. I cannot emphasize that enough. I think Grisel is in my board of directors. I'm on hers. We have a pool of incredible women and men, even in our HMBA familia, that you can draw from and you can bring as your board of director, your own board of directors, that they will help you think of the big picture. They will help you understand that you can learn it, that you can see it. They will put things in perspective, and they will give you the advice and the vantage point that is going to help you unblock that paralysis that you have in your head, and help you think of other angles that are also really helpful in the imposter syndrome and a host other areas in your journey of your career. Recognizing the consequences kind of falls into thinking of the big picture. They kind of go hand in hand. And then, plan for the rain. So what happens, you heard me speak, what's the worst can happen? Obviously, I was exaggerating about getting fired. I mean, there are very seldom situations where that happens, but if you also kind of put yourself in perspective and think, okay, what happens if this goes sour? What's the worst that can happen? Half the time, it's not as bad as what you think in your head, and how you think it's going to be perceived. What's I think the other one's cut off on mine, so I can't read it.
It says, yeah. So understand that you are learning something not yet. Here's the critical piece. HMBA has 6,000 individuals across the country who are willing to spend time with you, volunteer with you, speak to you. If you are on this call and you have had a struggle of any kind, trust me, somebody at HMBA has had it as well, right? Whether that has been depression, or not knowing what this tax law is, or not sure about the compliance piece. If you're getting an assignment, if you're a student, or a young lawyer, and young lawyer we define from 0 to 6 years, and you're not sure about a piece of law, reach out to HMBA. Carla Martin, who is on here, she'll find me. My job is to find somebody to help you. And we understand that there's like timeliness components, right? Sometimes you need the answer right away. Find us. You are not alone. The biggest thing about imposter syndrome is that it causes you to think you are alone, and you are not alone. It is the easiest thing to kind of like forget, right? This idea of, and there was one, false evidence appearing real, right? That's what fear is. When you are physiologically triggered, you have to learn which triggers are. And as soon as you're physiologically triggered, you have to start figuring out, is this fear? Am I acting or behaving out of fear? And I say that because I have stayed at jobs where I shouldn't stay because I'm afraid of looking for another job. Or I stayed at a law firm because I didn't have the time to interview. If you take nothing from this talk, from this time frame, is like, you are your own block, you are your own advocate, but you're not alone. We're here to help you. If there's something you're not sure about, reach out to us. If you're looking to go find a job in-house, we've got a whole corporate counsel division that will help you figure those things out. If you're applying to jobs, I'm an employment attorney. I'm the first one who can help you interview. I can tell you about how to interview for different types of positions. if you're in a job that you can't stand, reach out to your HMBA family. Say, hey, this is super highly confidential. And then start figuring out what your next move is. Don't get stuck in fear. Don't get stuck feeling like you need to be miserable. And I say that from experience, right? I have been in places where I'm miserable, but I stay thinking that that's what I have to do for the moment. Don't do that to yourself. Come find us. We are here to help you. So my biggest moment of imposter syndrome happened while I was in college. I was in a seminar and someone turned to me. I went to an Ivy League school and someone turned to me and said, "You're only here because you're the diversity candidate." And I have to tell you that I spent years believing that, years thinking that the only reason I was in a room at a big law firm had the first in-house place was because I was the diversity hire. I felt that. I bullied myself, right? And so I'm here to tell you, who gives a fuck? At the end of the day, who cares? Who cares if I was the diversity hire? I'm there and I'm doing a rocking job. Who cares if I was the diversity like person at an Ivy League school? I got in. I got myself out, right? So sometimes the best thing you could tell yourself is who cares? Who cares? Uh, that's been the best thing for me, right? So I don't know which one of these will be the best thing for you. But for me, having to flag every time I was bullying myself was really, really horrible, frankly. It was a horrible experience to be faced with how many times I mistreated myself because if my friends, my husband, or my parent, my mother would have done that to me, I would not be friends with them. I would have been divorced or I would have left my house, right? But because it's me, I can't kind of get away with me. Um, so that was helpful. And the other big thing for me was telling myself, who cares? Who cares? Who cares if I'm the diversity hire, right? I'm actually there. I'm the one that's doing the work. Uh, of these things, what do you think is the most important for you? If you could throw it in the chat and then we'll read it out. Because I want you to walk away with one thing you can do, one thing you can commit to practicing. So any of these things, what's your thing?
I'm a big who cares person, as you know.
I think you taught me that.
Huh? I'm a big who cares. What's the worst that can happen? Plan for the rain and who cares? And I give this example now because now I have an all Latina compliance team. And the first thing that some of my hires asked me, not me, not even the people above me or lateral to me, the Latinas asked me, what are people gonna think? Do you think they're gonna think that I just got hired because you wanted a Latina posse? I mean, entre nos, there's been white posses for the entire existence. So I didn't see anything wrong with it. It did hire the best candidates, and it just all happened to be Latina females. And I think we are the only, or one of the few, all compliance teams that are all women and then all Latinas. But I said to them, so who cares? Do your job. They're gonna respect you. And do you think the 5 white men in the table are looking around going, you think people are gonna say something because there are all these white dudes in here and one of us came because we went to the same school and we play golf together, or we know each other from boarding school or whatever? No, they just get there, go to work, and they help each other out. So why are we racking our brains whether or not what people think about us? Who cares?
Who cares? So throw in the chat which one works for you. And if any of you have any tips that we can share with each other, right? Because this is about mutual benefit. If anybody has a tip on what they've done for their own imposter syndrome, Sonia, if you could read them out. No, you gotta be off mute to do
Learning
that.
on not to be hard on myself when things don't go a certain way, 100%. Not to let people or words define me, holding on to the who cares.
If you are having an imposter syndrome attack, in psychology, we call that a hypothalamus attack, right? Because it's the back of your brain that's kind of shooting out chemicals that are making you feel fight or flight. So that's literally, physiologically, you're literally feeling anxiety. A lot of people like want to say, oh, it's all in your brain. No, no, there's chemicals going through your body. You've all heard this. It's not like rocket science, but just like sometimes you have to restart your computer or restart your phone, if you take deep breaths, 5 deep breaths, it automatically forces your brain chemistry to go to the frontal part of your brain. So your frontal lobe is your rational thinking lobe. If you ever find yourself suffering from anxiety, whether it's imposter syndrome or otherwise, close your eyes, take 5 deep breaths on a 4 in, 4 counts to take the breath in, and 8 on an 8 count to take the breath out. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8 to exhale. It forces your brain chemistry. I don't know why, but it forces your brain chemistry to pop out, and it resets so that your rational brain kicks in. Please understand that when you're having anxiety or feeling fear, it is a physiological response, and only a physiological response to that will counter it. So you literally have to breathe. For some people, they literally have to walk around. Whatever you have to do to implement the physiological response to your body's chemistry. Because people like to say, oh, it's all in your brain. Oh, you shouldn't feel anxious. Mierda, that does not help, right? You need a physiological response, whether it's walking around or breathing, to actually reset your brain. It's super, super important. Any other suggestions that are on
Hey,
the chat?
Grisel,
Yep.
question for you. What happens if you're put on the spot though and you don't have the opportunity to, just breathe or go for a walk?
Good. Thank you for reminding me. A glass of water. If you're going into a meeting or a hearing, always have a glass in front of you. As a psychologist, this is a trick. If those of you who have therapists, watch your therapist do this. As a psychologist, the trick is always have a glass of water. Why? Because when somebody asks you something and you can't respond, you need a minute to think about it. It's literally you take the drink and let your body process. Also, don't be afraid of saying, I need to think about that. It took me a long time to learn to say, I'm not sure. Let me figure this out. I'm not sure. Let me think about it. Give me a second to think about it is usually very helpful. It is super important if you're a student or a young lawyer. If you don't know the answer, just say that, but in a professional manner. So, I need to think about that and research a little bit more. It usually will buy you time. Carla, thank you for that question. And now we want to open it up to any questions you might all have. Sonia, do you have any suggestion on like when you're put on the spot?
Yeah, I usually repeat the question. Repeating the question is also a tactic that it slows down your brain, and it gives you time to think how to formulate a response. But I don't know, as ignorant as you think that sounds, it's actually a sign that you're very mature in your thinking, and that you're not going to just respond just because for the sake of responding. And typically nobody takes, oh, that person doesn't know that, they want to be a little more thoughtful and intentional about giving you a response.
Yeah. Any other tips from the audience? Any questions? You could throw it in the chat. You don't have to worry.
Yeah, and it's normal to feel nervous, and anxious. Like my GC was in front of the chairman of the board and we were talking right next to each other and I saw him fidgeting. And I looked at him and I was like, are you nervous? And he's like, I'm always petrified before I have to talk. And I was like, mira eso.
Los de arriba todos piensan lo mismo.
Everybody
Goes through
has the same. We're all human. It's all the same. We all put our pants the same way. We all go 6 feet on the ground the same way. We are exactly the same.
Well, so we want to thank you for your time, but remember, right? You have the ability to search for ways to make your situation better. The minute you stop searching, you absolutely will never find an answer or a solution. If you're worried, if you're anxious, if you're feeling it, reach out to us. We are totally here to help you. We will stop recording. Carla, let's go ahead and stop recording just in case anybody has any questions. Sonia and I will definitely stay on